There is a country where women once knitted in full traditional costumes, sitting in the sand dunes of the North Sea, and where that image became so iconic it ended up on 1 million postcards. Today I want to take you from that history all the way up to the contemporary makers and designers who are making the Netherlands one of the most exciting knitting countries right now. Let's get into it. Knitting culture. If you've ever come across an old postcard, and I mean those very old ones from the early 1900s, there is a good chance that you've seen them. The women in full traditional costume sitting in the sand and knitting. They were specifically from the province of Zeeland, and even more specifically from the island of Walcheren, and they were called breistertjes. That means little girls knitting. And somewhere along the way, their image became so deeply associated with Dutch identity that painters, photographers, and tourist publications couldn't get enough of them. They ended up on postcards that were sent all over the world. And what is fascinating is that this wasn't staged folklore. Knitting in Zeeland was completely ordinary. Women knitting while they walked, while they waited, while they sat outside in the evening. It was simply what you did with your hands when they weren't doing something else. But to visitors from abroad, it looked like something out of another world. The combination of the elaborate regional costume, the wild North Sea dunes, and the quiet rhythm of knitting needles was irresistible. And the costumes are worth pausing on as well, because by the 19th century, the Netherlands had more than 100 regional dresses, shaped by geography, culture, and religion. In Zeeland, that meant layered skirts, embroidered bodices, and the distinctive white cap that you'll recognize immediately from the postcards. Each village had its own variation, and knitting was woven into almost all of them. But the knitting tradition here goes even deeper than the postcard images, because all along the coast, the Dutch fishermen wore ganseys, that are densely constructed sweaters worked in the round with stitch patterns that varied from village to village. And what makes the Dutch gansey tradition particularly remarkable is that these patterns historically were never written down. They lived entirely in the hands and memories of the women who made them, passed down from mother to daughter, from generation to generation. And it wasn't until 1985 where a woman named Henriette van der Clift Tellegen wrote a book collecting 40 different gansey patterns and essentially saving a whole knitting tradition from disappearing. And the wool that was traditionally used for these ganseys has its own story as well. Texel is an island just off the Dutch coast and gave its name to a breed of sheep whose wool was the standard knitting material for generations. The wool was short and fairly rough, so to spin good yarn from it, it needed to be tightly twisted, 5 threads plied together. And that yarn was called sajet, which means worsted yarn. It has a beautiful natural gloss from the lanolin. It is warm and water resistant, and it is often dyed a deep blue using indigo, which was of course perfect for the fishermen working at the sea. But then in the 1960s, when synthetic yarns became more and more widely available, the sajet production pretty much stopped entirely. The grande dame of brioche. Now, before we get into the full designer segment, I want to share someone with you who has a very deep connection to the Netherlands, and that is Nancy Marchand. Nancy grew up in Indiana in the US, and she states that the only yarn that she had available as a child were a couple of different colors from the local Woolworths. And she did what any creative person would do. She took those yarns and started redesigning patterns and getting creative and coming up with, her own take on everything. Because as it is so often the case, as a child, you don't really know what's difficult and what's not. You just see something you want to do and you do it. Nancy Marchand shared these childhood memories and more in an interview she did with the blog The Loopy You. So if you're interested in that, I'm going to link it for you down below in the description box, along with everything else that I'm talking about in this video. Years later, Nancy ended up moving to Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and it was here where she really started her life's work, what she really became so well known for in the knitting world. So brioche itself is an old stitch. It originates from France and creates this squishy, reversible fabric that you get by slipping stitches and doing yarn overs. But what Nancy Marchand is so well known for is the two-color brioche. And she really dedicated her life's work to it. She systemized it, she made it popular, and she also wrote several books about it. Her book Knitting Brioche came out in 2009 and is still considered the definite reference. She followed it with Knitting Fresh Brioche in 2014, and she's also written some more books on it. And two of my favorite patterns of hers are gold work, this graphic architectural scarf with an 8-stitch increase and decrease that she said reminded her of gold work embroidery, and Iris Divine, a flowing triangular shawl that shows just how elegant two-color brioche can look, if you know what you're doing. Which brings me to something I want to mention, because if you are curious about brioche and specifically Nancy Marchand's work, but are a little bit unsure because you have never worked that stitch before, there is a fantastic beginner's class on Skillshare, and it is called Basics of Brioche, How to Knit an Infinity Scarf. So I have personally only knitted brioche once. I tried. I've made the boho blush shawl by Andrea Mowry. And these sections here are supposed to be brioche, but I tried to learn the stitch or teach myself the stitch, and I clearly must have done something wrong, because that is not brioche stitch. And that is why I was so happy to discover that Skillshare has a class on learning this exact stitch. Skillshare is very kindly sponsoring this video, and I've been using and recommending them for a long time now. They are the best place to learn a creative skill or pick up a new hobby. So if you're looking to reconnect with your creativity, I think Skillshare is a wonderful place to learn directly from other makers. They have countless classes covering all different kinds of topics, from crafting and DIY, to writing, to photography, to home and lifestyle. And as you can see in the home and lifestyle category, for example, they also have classes on gardening, interior design, and baking, which I think is wonderful. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So if brioche has been on your list to learn, now is a good time. I have to tell you something before we move on to the rest of the designers. I have spent a long time researching the Dutch knitting culture, and I noticed that the Dutch knitting community is enormous. There are so many talented designers out there, and I have put together a pattern bundle on Ravelry with more than 80 knitting patterns in it. Unfortunately, as much as I would love to, I cannot feature all of them here in this video, so I am going to link the bundle in the description box for you so that you can check them out yourself. Contemporary designers. The first designer I want to talk about is Joanna Eng, and Joanna moved to the Netherlands in 2009, and this is also when she started to knit and started to find her love for designing as well. What I find so appealing about her work is the attention she puts into thoughtful construction and refined details. I think she has a very unique design aesthetic, and her patterns are just absolutely gorgeous. She currently has 14 different patterns available on Ravelry, and today I want to highlight 2 of them. And the first one I would like to talk about is the Cherry cardigan. It's a lightweight, elegant, feminine cardigan that's knitted flat from the top down, starting with a rib neckband. And what makes the construction particularly clever is that the button bands and the fronts are worked simultaneously, and German short rows are used to raise the back neckline for a better fit. The raglan shaping is integrated right into the front bands, and once the body is finished, the sleeves are picked up and worked top down and around. It's recommended to be worn with a positive ease of 4 to 7.75 inches, and that corresponds to 10 to 20 centimeters, so I think it would work beautifully as an elegant layering piece. And then there is Rib Wave, which is a very popular pattern of hers, and I think just by looking at it you can probably see why. It's a top-down pullover, but the construction is genuinely unusual because rather than starting at the neckline and working in the round, Joanna begins by knitting the front panel flat, using German short rows to shape the shoulders and neckline. And once the front is complete to the underarm, it's set aside. Stitches are picked up along the shoulders, and the back panel is worked in the same way. The 2 panels are then joined, and the body continues in the round all the way up to the hem. It sounds a bit intricate, but knitters who have made it consistently describe it as surprisingly addictive, always changing but never overwhelming. And the signature detail is the wavy ribbing that runs through the body. So that's sections of stockinette interrupted by ribbling rib panels that give the sweater its name and its quietly striking texture. I think that is exactly the kind of sweater that looks so effortless, but there is real thought behind the construction and design behind it. The next designer I would like to talk about is Irina from Love Knit NL, and she has a very feminine aesthetic as well, as you will be able to see in just a minute, because I think her, Summer Dreams top is a perfect example for her beautiful aesthetic. It's a quick and enjoyable project. Irina says it can be finished in just a few days, and it has this lovely playful detail on the back. Optional buttons along the center backline, which give it a little something unexpected. And you also get a choice of neckline finishing, either delicate ruffles or a clean, simple edge. So you can tailor the mood of the finished piece to your own style. And I think it's just a very special design. And then there is the Dunas shirt, and I think not only is it very beautiful, but the construction is really interesting as well. The shirt is worked sideways from sleeve to center, which gives the fabric a lovely drape. You begin by knitting the left sleeve in the round, then the body, front and back are worked flat together. Irina has also included both a seamless version for more experienced knitters and an easier seam version for those who prefer a more straightforward approach, which makes this a very accessible pattern regardless of where you are in your knitting journey. And I have something very exciting to share, because Irina has very generously agreed to gift one of her beautiful knitting patterns to one of you. All you have to do is leave a comment down below letting me know which of Irina's lovely patterns you would like to knit, and I'm going to draw the winner exactly 1 week from now and announce it in a community post here on YouTube. Please also add your Ravelry username so that Irina can gift you the pattern. And thank you so much to Irina for making this amazing giveaway possible. Next up is Mandy Julie, a Dutch designer whose designs feel like they have just fallen out of a vintage French fashion magazine. She has a very romantic and feminine aesthetic, a bit nostalgic, and yeah, just beautiful. I think you're going to love her designs. And I think her Françoise cardigan is the perfect example for that. It is named after the French singer and icon Françoise Hardy. And Mandy Julie says, if you want to feel like Françoise Hardy yourself, this is the perfect piece for you. It is a slightly cropped Parisian vintage-inspired design worked in baby alpaca, which gives it that beautiful softness and drape. The body is fitted through a ribbed hem that accentuates the waist, then opens into a romantic lace stitch panel that runs through the body of the cardigan. And that lace stitch is explained both in writing and in a chart. It's designed to work as a versatile layering piece over dresses, skirts, or with a pair of trousers. And it's really one of those cardigans that elevates everything you put on with it, I think. And then we have the Sasha cardigan, which feels a little bit different, where the Françoise cardigan is very elegant and light. The Sasha cardigan is a lot fuller, and it's also worked with a 100% wool yarn. She used Pergint from Sannes Garn. It also has the same romantic feel as the Françoise, but with slightly billowy lantern sleeves, and she calls them bishop sleeves. And that gives it that wonderful, dramatic, almost medieval quality. It is worked from the bottom up, and the button plackets are worked with a leaf-like decorative stitch that runs along both sides, and like all of her patterns, it's explained both in writing and in a chart. Next, let's talk about Gregoria Fibers, and the person behind the brand is Anna. Anna is originally from Spain, but she has since moved to Amsterdam, and the name of her company has a very special story because Gregoria was her grandmother. Gregoria Fibers initially started as a naturally dyed yarn company, but has since evolved into a knitwear design brand. Anna has now over 100 patterns on Ravelry, and her main mission is making timeless knitting pieces that one can cherish for years to come, with a balance between elegance and subtlety, evoking a warm sense of nostalgia. And that philosophy is very much present in the patterns I want to show you. And the first pattern I would like to talk about is Anaïs. It comes in 2 different versions and both are worth mentioning for sure. The T version is a beautiful summer piece. It has a boat neck, sleeves and a fitted silhouette. It's worked from the top down seamlessly using the contiguous method with the neckline shaped with short rows. It's knitted holding a strand of a cotton linen and a silk merino yarn together, which gives it this incredibly light and drapey quality. And the sweater version shares the same boat neck and fitted silhouette, but adds a voluminous ruffled hem, so you get that same elegant foundation with a little more presence and warmth for the cooler months. And then there is Teresia, and it comes as both a sweater and a cardigan version within the one pattern. And I definitely want to talk about both because I think they are just so beautiful. The sweater is accented with a sophisticated keyhole cut-out cable detail at the neckline, finished with a delicate button that closes at the center front. And the cardigan version replaces this with a sophisticated cable button band. Both are worked top down using the contiguous method, and the back yoke is worked flat first, shaped with increases, and the fronts are done separately before picking up and knitting the sleeve stitches along the shoulders. And the result in both cases is just this very refined classic piece that I think is so timeless and endlessly wearable. Next up, let's talk about MJ Wilms, who is the designer behind Alice Knitwear. And when I looked at her patterns, I instantly noticed something interesting, because she names her patterns after European port towns and cities like Sevilla, Dover, Milano, and Le Havre. Her aesthetic is very recognizable. It's oversized, colorwork heavy, 80s inspired silhouettes with generous positive ease and drop shoulder construction. Bold, cozy, and very wearable, I think. And the Orvandal pullover is probably one of her most recognizable designs. It's an all-over stranded colorwork pullover with an 80s inspired oversized fit and drop shoulder construction with around 12.5 inches that corresponds to 30 centimeters of positive ease and large sleeves to complement the silhouette. And the entire pullover is knitted in the round and uses steeking. So the body is worked bottom up with steek bridges for the sleeves and front neck, which are then cut open before the collar and sleeves are added working top down. And then we have the Groninge Henley pullover, which has a very different aesthetic and also a very different construction. It's a bottom-up pullover that's worked entirely flat. The front is knitted first, then the back, then the 2 sleeves, and the pieces are blocked and seamed together before the collar is added. It has a drop shoulder construction, which makes the length easy to adapt to your own body. The yarn is worked double. She used Nutiden from Unorweyer, which is an unspun yarn, which gives the fabric a beautiful softness and loft. And the Henley collar gives it this relaxed, slightly menswear-inspired quality that feels very current. Next, let's talk about Famke from Mipi, the label, who is a 26-year-old based in Amsterdam, and she describes her own aesthetic as playful, bohemian, and vintage-inspired, with a commitment to making every pattern as size-inclusive as possible. Her patterns have this wonderfully distinctive character, I think. And the Primrose puff sweater and cardigan is, I think, a wonderful example of what she does. It's actually 2 separate patterns in one, a vintage-inspired design featuring puff sleeves and a contiguous shoulder construction. The cardigan version features a delicate lace and cable motif, whilst the sweater has 2 color-stranded colorwork. And what makes the construction particularly interesting is how the puff sleeves are created. Both garments begin with stitches cast on for the back, shaped with German short rows. Then stitches are picked up for each front, also shaped with short rows. And new stitches are then cast on to form the subtle puff sleeves, and the neckline is shaped with increases. It's a genuinely clever piece of construction that achieves a very romantic and voluminous sleeve without being structurally too complex. And the Tallulah texture cardigan is maybe even more characteristic of Famke's design aesthetic. It's a drop shoulder cardigan with all over texture and lace, worked in sections, which makes it a quick and entertaining knit, I would imagine. The back is worked flat with increases, then stitches are picked up for the fronts, which are joined with the back and worked flat. The sleeves are then picked up around the armhole and worked in the round with an easy eyelet motif before being transformed into bishop sleeves with a long cinched cuff of 2x2 ribbing. And that bishop sleeve detail is what gives the Tallulah its drama, and it's the same silhouette that Mendy Yuli uses in the Sasha cardigan we had a look at earlier in this video. Now let's talk about one of my personal all-time favorite designers, and that is Natasha Hornby. Natasha was born in South Africa, and when she was 4 years old she moved to the Netherlands, and she actually moved to Texel, so the island that we talked about earlier in this video. And then when she was 17 she moved to Amsterdam to study design and textiles, and that is where she is still located. What makes Natasha's work distinctive is her use of unusual construction. So she frequently changes the direction of knitting within a single garment, and she has a gift for making technically complex patterns feel genuinely wearable rather than showy. And the Man shawl is one of her most popular patterns. It's a large triangular shawl that's worked top down, starting with a classic garter tab cast on, with all the color work done using the slip stitch technique, so you are handling only one strand at a time, and it uses a combination of stitch patterns and mosaic color work, carefully explained in writing and in charts. Next up we have the Marin sweater, and this is a pattern I have made myself. Let me show you. And in case you are wondering why I am not wearing my version in this video, it is because I personally made a very poor yarn choice when I started knitting this cardigan. I'm not sure if you'll be able to tell, but this sweater. This sweater came out extremely stiff, and it is actually very uncomfortable to wear, and I think the reason is that I held the yarn double to get gauge, and this is a cotton wool blend. This is Sauna by Wool Dreamers, and I think it was just not the right yarn for this pattern. I think it is amazingly beautiful, and I definitely want to knit it again with a more fitting yarn, but I wanted to show it to you nonetheless so that you can see for yourself that this is truly a gorgeous, gorgeous pattern. The Marin sweater's most prominent design features are the textured front and back panels, inspired by the intricate embroidered bodices found in a variety of cultures actually. To give these panels the appearance of verticality, the sweater is worked sideways. So you start with a provisional cast on at the upper arm and work the body sideways to the center back and front. And the two halves are then joined by a modified 3-needle bind-off for a flat center front and back seam. And those raised floral details are created by wrapping the yarn multiple times around a cluster of stitches. It sounds a bit intricate, but it is not as difficult as you would think, and it can actually be quite meditative, I would say. And then we have Phoebe. That is her latest design, and I think it's just absolutely gorgeous, and I would love to knit this one myself. It's a wrap sweater that's worked seamlessly from the top down with integrated double knit trims worked at the same time as the body, so there is no picking up stitches for finishing. And there is a slit for the ties that is worked into the right front as you go, and the ties are worked in double knitting to complete the sweater. The wrap shape means that the sizing is very flexible, and the result is one of those pieces that just looks effortlessly elegant, and I think it would be so versatile and can work with a number of different outfits. Let's talk about Taiti Lutzak now, and she is a Ukrainian-born designer who now lives in the Netherlands. And what I find so fascinating about her work is that she really bridges the gap between science, culture, and craft. She originally studied botany, and she also has a PhD, but she found herself in knitting as a creative escape from strict lab protocols. So what started as a way to decompress from the rigor of academic science became a way to express herself and embrace her Ukrainian heritage. And having worked in a lab for several years myself, this is a feeling I can very much relate to. The first pattern of hers I would like to talk about is the bifurca vest, and it comes from the term bifurcation, which means splitting one whole thing into two different parts. And because the back and the front of the vest are identical, this is basically a, two-forked bifurca piece. The vest consists of a central panel worked in the round, featuring a botanical colorwork pattern, and 4 sides worked sideways from the central panel and joined at the underarms. It is modular, clever, and produces this beautifully graphic result from a surprisingly logical process. And the second pattern of hers I would like to show you is called Padolist, and this is an old archaic Ukrainian term for the month of November. And Teti says that the moment this name came to her, there was no doubt in her head that this was the right name for this exact pattern. It is a blouse that is worked top down in the round with a raglan shoulder construction, and the opening of the neckline is framed with leafy colorwork worked flat using the intarsia technique, picked up from an I-cord. The extra puffy sleeves are accentuated with another colorwork section that's worked in the round and tapered downwards to the cuff, and the body and sleeves are trimmed with double knitted hems and cuffs. And now let's talk about Stephen West. Stephen is originally from the US, but he moved to Amsterdam a number of years ago, and he is one of the best known and most loved designers in the contemporary knitting world. His work is joyful, colorful, and technically inventive, and he runs his designs and kits through Stephen and Penelope, which is one of Amsterdam's best loved yarn shops. I want to share 2 of his patterns with you today, and the first one is called the woven checks shawl. Now, if you are maybe a bit intimidated by Stephen West's work because his shawls tend to look very elaborate and complex, I think this would be a great choice of pattern for you. You select one solid or semi-solid main color and one self-striping contrast color. The shawl begins at the small tip and works sideways with increases towards the border, so you only ever work with one color at a time. Stripes and slip stitches from the woven checks motif, creating the illusion of the self-striping yarn weaving in and out of the garter ridges, with I-cord edges framing the large triangular shape. It is very customizable in size and also includes videos linked throughout the instructions to help you cast on and bind off. And then we have the brioche shawl, which I think is such a fitting design for this video because it also features the brioche stitch. You select 4 shades of a DK weight yarn and work this ornate assemblage of brioche and dip stitches. The shawl begins at the top center with an I-cord tab cast on, followed by a textured droplet stitch. Single color brioche ribbing occurs between the various dip stitch sections with garter ridges framing each texture. And I want to mention another detail that I find very charming because Stephen West and Nancy Marchand that I talked about earlier in the video are actually neighbors in Amsterdam, and they even designed a pattern together which is called the brioche buddies. And if you would like to learn even more about Stephen West's work, I have made a video completely dedicated to him that is part of my Knitting Icon series, and I'm going to link it for you both on the screen and also in the description box down below. So although the Netherlands might not be the first country that comes to mind when you're thinking of knitting, I hope this video was able to show you how rich and alive the knitting culture is here. From the breistertjes of Volgere all the way up to the contemporary designers, I think the Netherlands are definitely a very important country in the knitting world that you should know about. And if you enjoyed this video, I think you're also going to like this one here. Until next time, happy knitting, take care, bye.